Let's go! Cue the music. And for this panel, our moderator is Dr. Wolfgang Amadeus Vitale, crypto protocol expert at Bitcoin Suisse. We've also got Charles Hoskinson, CEO and founder at Input Output and co-founder of Ethereum. We got Nikola Stojanow, head of the board at Eternity Foundation, and Fabian, founder and chief blockchain architect at LUKSO.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm here joined by real crypto G's to have a conversation about a decade of decentralized innovation, crypto innovation. So what decade? Last decade, but also next decade. Let's get ready for the future. Because here, these crypto G's, we don't respect them only for what they did in the past, but also because they're still here, building, leading, and inspiring day in and day out. So that's what's exciting to me, and I hope we'll have a great fun and conversation. So let's start with you, Charles. I want to talk about vision first, because I know you have been here since the first generations of cryptocurrencies, since the early days of Bitcoin. And I'm sure you had your vision on what cryptography and crypto economics, economic incentives can bring to the world, how to make the world a better place. And I was rewatching your TED Talk from 10 years ago. It was on the future is decentralized, nice title, clear, strong. It was good, and you had a clear vision on what we can actually provide to the world with blockchain, smart contracts, even DeepIn. We call it DeepIn now. Previously, it was like decentralized networks. But anyway, what I want to ask you is, after 10 years, how much we have achieved from your early vision? What is still left to do? Did your goals change? Did your vision change in any way? Maybe priorities or focus? What you thought was more promising, maybe it's not as much. And, tell us about your history and what is your current view of the industry and what we can provide to the world.
So, we inherited most of our vision as an industry from the Cyberpunk movement in the 1970s and 80s and in the 90s. And they asked a very simple question. If information can move instantaneously to anyone, anywhere, what does this do to the institutions of the world and the world as a whole? And people started asking, why can't money do that? Why can't my vote and voice do that? And ultimately, what about the governance structures we have, whether they be corporations or businesses? So we inherited that as an industry, and we think in terms of generations, at least I do, with respect to cryptocurrencies. And each generation kind of brings a new set of capabilities. It doesn't kill the old generation. Like Bitcoin is still the largest cryptocurrency right now, but it adds a new dimension so you can do more and interesting things. And so when I came on board late 2010, Bitcoin was in its infancy, and nobody was in it for the money because there was no money. You had to buy your coffee. Nobody would buy it for you, and they thought you were in a cult. It still kind of is a cult. But it was all about basically moving value around with no trusted counterparty or central authority, which was amazing innovation. I mean, DigiCash tried to do this in the 90s, and it failed. But very shortly thereafter, when it was successful, people started realizing that you needed to have programmability in these transactions. Because with programmability, you can go from just, I push Bitcoins around, to I now have a whole constellation of interesting things I can do, like DeFi or issuing assets or what have you. So the second generation was Ethereum, which was started here in Canada and a few other places, and it has now had a chance to build a gargantuan multi-trillion-dollar industry. And then the third generation, which kind of started around 2015, was dealing with the consequences of decentralization and programmability. Namely, we need to do this at scale. It needs to be interoperable with both the legacy and non-legacy systems. And then finally, how do you govern this resource? Because there's no custodial company that's in charge of all of that. The last generation, I think, is the one we're coming into, and you see at Denver and all these other places, the need for privacy and identity. These are the last miles. People can't really move trillions of dollars around without KYC and AML, and identity can't do business without identity because there's always a public part and a private part. But how do you do that in a decentralized way at scale across legacy and Web3 systems? And once we solve that, I think that's the last mile for doing all the changes that we've wanted to do since the cypherpunk era of the economic, political, and social system. So decentralized social networks and CBDCs and voting systems on a blockchain and so forth. So we're almost there. 15 years, we've gone from nothing to a multi-trillion-dollar ecosystem with 450 million people. I can't find any other technology category that's growing that quickly.
True. I agree, and I like this, different generations of cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology in general. It explains well how we went from, early visions and what we could provide. Ethereum wanted to build a world computer. That was the second generation. And it was a very good vision and everything, but with time, we understood that, there are different ways to build things, and it couldn't scale,
right,
and so on. So we are moving, and I think we are still early with infrastructure, because a lot of people will always complain, like, where are the apps? Everyone is only investing and building infrastructure, but I think we are not done yet with infra.
Right.
And that's how I want to move to you, Nikola, talking about infrastructure. So we have talked about vision, roadmap, overview. I want to now focus on infrastructure a bit, because you're building a layer one. And you started with the Eternity Foundation a long time ago. Back then, we had Ethereum, as I said, building the global world computer, and some other projects, but not as much competition as we have today. Like today, you have many layer ones, really, and also relatively easy options to spin up, like app chains, roll-ups, other layer 2 solutions, and so on. So I want to ask you, that you have been building with the Eternity Foundation and layer 1, how do you keep innovating and differentiating when there are so many options to build your own chains and so many other projects also building layer 1s?
Oh, that's an interesting one. So picking up where Charles left off, when Ethereum launched, there was a lot of people that had ideas how to continue this track, how to continue innovating, and there were certain shortcomings with Ethereum where people said, you know what, when it comes to scalability, when it comes to gas fees, when it comes to, in general, also the smart contract language, things could be done better. And then, you guys came up with Cardano, we did Eternity, there was a lot of other projects that did different chains, but everybody started focusing on different aspects. And I remember, I think it was around late 2017, when you would have this incredibly interesting moment of, you have that first generation post-Ethereum layer 1s, which are still in the building process, where everybody was trying something different, everybody was solving for a different solution, but everybody was talking about interoperability, which was this incredibly amazing thing that you would be able to transfer an asset from one chain to another in a very simple and efficient way. But all the projects that I remember from then, and there was one from Toronto that I don't remember the name.
That was Aeon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Vanishing, nothing.
We're getting old, man.
I know, too. Even though we're quite young, though. And what happened was it vanished. And then infrastructure in itself started developing. So each ecosystem started to go for that holy grail. How do I build my chain? How do I populate my chain with an ecosystem and a community which actually is functioning? And in the next step, what are the applications that are going to be necessary in order to drive it to the next level, which would then everybody was working towards, which would be mass adoption. Now, the problem that I saw, that I believe that also you guys can share, is that it's, number one, if you're a layer 1, it's incredibly hard to build your community, because there are so many things that if you misstep in one way or another, because you're an incredibly public figure back then, people were holding weekly videos where they were captivating.
You watched the AMAs, come on.
I did actually. Then again, Fabian, you and the others, that they had this holy status almost, and people were following this. So you would have to go down this road, and you would have to be able to continuously innovate and keep people excited, because if we were honest, the technological aspect was that initial driver where people would be like, this is quite interesting, but then also there was the idea of this financial gain that you would actually follow during this stage. And then once you were in this ecosystem, what do you have? The majority of projects raced on a white paper basis. So, it was super early, so you actually have to build a chain, which is quite complicated. And I remember when we chose Erlang as a programming language, the idea behind it was that Sony Ericsson had used it. They had especially built it for being able to transact information quickly from A to B, and it sounded like pretty much the solution to the perfect blockchain. But then you realize there's like 3.5 people in the world that actually program on Erlang. So that, unfortunately, is a big issue. And then you continue. With each step, there is a new problem that pops up. And when you go further in time, you start to realize that when it comes to infrastructure, the biggest issues still have not been solved, which is your user experience. Like, you need to have easy ways to have people participate in your chain, in your layer, in your products. And that has, in the most recent time, been, in my opinion, something that has gained in significance a lot, and that people are solving for at this stage, because the cryptographical aspect to the majority of people is of secondary importance. It's about how can I use the product in the most simple manner that I'm used to for my daily interaction with any kind of application, if it's on the internet, if it's on your mobile phone. And now I believe that infrastructure is very much working towards that goal, to be able to very simply simplify things and make sure that you can capture people more in different sectors without really having them to understand or really use blockchain in itself.
Okay. So we can say that Eternity didn't change focus much over the years. The goal is still the same.
Eternity did change
community.
a lot, actually, because I came back last year to run the foundation, and for me it was very simple. One mistake that I have also made in time was that we built technology to offer solutions to third parties, thinking that they're absolutely amazing. But that lack of communication to ask the other side, what's actually the problem that you have? How can we resolve it together? That is something that I've recently started implementing, and the change is absolutely insane. You really have to be able to communicate with the focus group that you want to work with and actually listen to them to build something which is useful. So that is definitely a big change.
All right. I think something very important that really changed the game of infrastructure over the last 10 years is ZK-proof technology, validity-proof technology, and basically giving rise to the modular stack. And at this point, for me, there is a question on how many layer ones we will have, like source of cryptoeconomic security, roots of trust, how many of those we will have. Because I can agree on a multi-chain world, but I expect to have some sort of centralizing forces, like have 3 or 4 big layer ones that do settlement, that do security and consensus, and then a lot of roll-ups on top. It's a possibility. I don't know. Maybe if you have different opinions, it's a question for the whole round. Did you ever consider becoming a layer 2? I think not.
The biggest problem with a layer 2 in today's stage is that if your layer 1 for any kind of reason stops working, you're screwed with your layer 2.
You have to choose wisely.
So you would have to actually be able to have either run a layer 2 on top of, a layer 1 on top of a layer 1, which is actually something that we finally made work, or you would just, like, the layer 2 are, in my opinion, something that has been riddled with issues from the beginning. It's painful, and again, like, if your underlying technology stops, you're screwed. It's over.
Yeah. You know, we wrote a paper called Minotaur around 2022, and one of our co-authors created Eigenlayer from it. And we created Midnight from that. But multi-resource consensus, I think, is the direction that this needs to go, where you'll have a sampling of well-established high network effect, probably going to be here forever, layer 1s, and then their product becomes security. And then you could sample the validators, the consensus nodes of those, and basically use that to maintain the state of your blockchain application or your network. So we're experimenting with something we're launching next year called Midnight, which is bringing the privacy and the identity. I mentioned the 4th generation, but I think that'll become the dominant way of doing things. Because as he said, you can't bet the whole farm on the fact that one standard is going to be there forever, especially when you don't have governance control over that standard.
I think we can go further into that in the second part on the future. But now I want to move from infrastructure to applications, users, real-world users with real needs. And I wanted to ask you, Fabian, because you have been doing this for a long time, and I think you always cared, but correct me if I'm wrong, about achieving mass adoption. Because, also talking to OGs on learning about different opinions on what is the value proposition of crypto, I think there are many different opinions, and that's good, because we are still exploring. I really believe we are still early. And, if we go to the extremes, I think there are 2 camps. There is one camp for which crypto will be useful or is useful only for niche applications or dystopic, distressed scenarios. And then there is another camp for which the goal was and still is to touch everyone and everything and really make the world a more fair or a better place in general. Maybe people will not know that they're using crypto. They will not think about the fact that they're using crypto, but they will feel that the internet is a better place and the world is a better place. So I want to know more about your history. If you always had this goal of enabling mass adoption, we can say that you are in that camp, and if innovation in the last decade made this vision more practically possible, like innovation in UX, innovation in standards, what's your story? And do you think we are ready? Do we have now the infrastructure to enable your vision of mass adoption?
I think the word mass adoption is a little bit overused. Because we all know that the blockchains do not scale to 8 billion people at the current time. But we don't even have any users, really, I would argue, really. We have people that are moving money from an exchange to a wallet and then from a wallet to another one. Maybe they go through a Uniswap in between, and that's where it ends. So I had this other, approach, or let's say my story is different than maybe, for example, Charles, who worked on low-level tech, inventing a new chain. I was the app developer of Ethereum, so I built the first front ends. And when you have a generic computing blockchain like Ethereum, where you can build anything, I figured out that standards are really important. I happened by accident, created the first smart contract standard with ERC20, which was based on a proposal of Vitalik, and we discussed it, and then basically it became the standard. But we know what standardization does. The whole space came out of it, right? Like everything we see today is based on tokens because of a single standard, right? ERC20. So somehow this pushed me into the standards direction, and I took a different approach. I took the approach of thinking, what are the core building blocks that we need as standards on a programmable network so that we can actually have use cases that go beyond finance, use cases that eventually will be interesting to your influencer, Instagram user, Twitter user, the social web, literally the internet, right? And blockchain can do a lot more. It's not just about money transferring. It's literally about owning your identity. It's about interacting with communities, having shared ownership in communities. DAOs, for example, it's an example, but DAOs are so far pretty much intransparent and only run by probably like some top 5 people. The rest is just some people that just hang in there too. But we can really use blockchain to transform society, and this comes back to this cyberpunk vision really, where it's about using this as a tool to change society as we know it, from top-down structures to more flat-level structures where we work through consensus. And I think what's missing here is the right standards. That is my argument. I have been here for a long time, since 2015 in Ethereum, since 2013 in the space itself. I have watched it all. There's so much money flew in the space, right? We saw it all. Like literally, the limit is reached of what can be done on ERC20, let's say. And what is missing, like Charles also said, is identity. And that's what I have been thinking the last 6 years about. Like I built a smart contract account standard that came out of ERC 7.5 from 2017, in fact. And I built this out as like a fully standardized smart contract account system that has everything that an account needs. And when you have an account that can hold information, it can become a profile. If it becomes a profile, people start to care about these accounts. If they start to care about these accounts and they have followers and friends and they're participating in DAOs with these profiles, that's when we start to probably see real users, normal people coming in, using it for some social purpose, and then later down the road discovering that there's something that has to do with transactions and maybe even tokens, money, and ownership, and they only discover this down the road. And that's the approach that I'm taking with LUKSO and with these standards, is create the identity first, which we did, make it now more accessible, make it social, make it interesting, allow people to come in and use blockchain without knowing that they're using blockchain. And then we can actually play around and discover what can be done with these on-chain identities that we truly now can self-sovereignly own. Where not only people have on-chain identities, but like, you know, an AI can have on-chain identities, a government or a corporation or brand or an artist or collective. They all can have their own profiles, and then we can see them interacting on-chain because it's quite transparent. And I think that's what will change society. I think that is the level that we haven't yet innovated on, because there's many chains that all try to make the better consensus, but the innovation on the smart contract levels, like, I mean, everything is just like an alteration of ERC20 and a little bit here and a little bit there, but it's all very focused on the trading and then the money aspect. But blockchain is just so far, it's so much more than what it can be. So that's what I'm looking forward building and seeing happening.
Awesome. All right. So I see some alignment here on your focus on identity with universal profile and the fourth generation of blockchain, cryptocurrency, identity. But you don't give as much priority on privacy yet on LUKSO. Because followers and social, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, I'm not smart enough to build a CK, zero knowledge proof consensus system. I mean, other people here, you know, can work on that. Yes, your universal profile is inherently a transparent profile because it's on the blockchain. Same like your accounts on blockchain are transparent. You can build systems that have privacy-preserving features on top of this. When you can attach any information to a profile, you can also attach systems that have selective sharing capabilities. Or maybe they reference your secret accounts in a secret way that only you can understand it. Or you can even have a profile on a CK chain. And then, but you know what? If you want to have reputation, and if you want to have society, and if you want to have community, transparency is extremely important, you know. Fair. You don't get reputation by being hidden and nobody knows what you're doing. It kind of goes together, so.
All right. Okay, then let's move to...
Can I talk a little bit about the need for privacy?
Please.
I support. Would anybody in the room be comfortable with all your Google searches forever being known by everybody in the world and searchable by everybody in the world?
Also the incognito ones, by the way.
Yeah. And would you be comfortable with your Amazon purchases or your bank statements or these things? Society requires two sides, public and private. And the reason why there's not mainstream adoption for blockchain yet is because we can't do the private side yet. Principles of blockchain are great. The auditability, the time stamping, the immutability, this concept of verifiable reconstructability, where you could bring something and we can reconstruct history and all come to an agreement that that's what really happened. In a world where facts and objective reality are challenged on a daily basis, people say fake news or deep fakes or these things, it is socially valuable to have institutions that are beyond reproach. But if you're going to introduce identity and break pseudonymity, you have to have at the same time privacy. Or otherwise, there's no way to get these systems to work and no one will trust them. When I go and talk to Goldman Sachs or I talk to BlackRock or I talk to Raytheon or IBM or anybody, they say, well, we like blockchain, we have blockchain groups, we have obviously amazing engineers working for us, but we can't trust data XYZ in the blockchain domain because our competitors will take it, or it breaks the law, or it breaks GDPR, or medical records, you know, it'll break HIPAA, whatever the heck it is. So can you give us a guarantee that when we do this and we attach human identities to it, that it's not going to be compromised? Now, Fabian's right, it's a horrendously complicated problem. You know, how do you actually make private smart contracts? And there's no satisfying stack of technology that makes it turnkey and easy for developers to do this holistically. There are some that can do private smart contracts, but you can't operate on private data. You need like MPC or a fully homomorphic encryption for that. And the interoperability is not even close to where it needs to be, which is why the fourth generation is just starting to come. And it's a graft-on. Okay, so it doesn't replace what's been achieved in generation 3, 2, or 1. You're still going to have Bitcoins and Ethereums and Cardanos and Eternities and these types of things, but they need a path where they can hybridize their applications to do this, if anything, just for regulatory compliance, like KYC and AML, which, by the way, has tons of personally identifiable information, and you don't want that in the public domain.
But I'm glad you mentioned innovation in cryptography as well, like MPC, FHA, because I think sometimes it's not clear. Like people would say, okay, Bitcoin 2009, it's 15 years. Where are the apps? I mean, is it too late? Why there is no real value? But the thing, there is still a lot of work to do. Not only infrastructure, but also cryptographic primitives can give us more tools. Right. Like we had no clue that we could have validity rollups like 5, 6 years ago at a reasonable, cheap production stage way. And more is coming. So I expect to have privacy implemented by default in blockchain and have real applications that are really useful.
Yeah, and they'll start
at some point
where the pain points are. Right now it's regulation, so that's where people are going to force, like, how do you regulate Uniswap or DeFi or these things? But then it'll work its way into supply chain, health records, these types of things.
All right. We don't have a lot of time left, so I'll give 1 minute each to tell us what to be hyped about for your projects. Like maybe, Nikola, you can start with Aeternity, future upgrades, give us the alpha.
Well, I would catch up onto what both of my co-panelists have said before. So at the foundation, after we have successfully, with the biggest contribution in voting, because when votings in general for important things are happening, we have a voting app on Eternity where we use each token holder to be able to cast a vote. And we recently did the biggest voting with the last hard fork called Ceres, which went through. That was great. And right now, it was about creating the infrastructure where you would have all, in my opinion, necessary products that a layer 1 needs, from bridge to non-custodial wallets over DEXs, etc., PP. And this is now going into the next stage where we're looking into identity and private blockchains, where on one side you would have something called hyperchains, where you would be able, for example, proof of work chain, to launch a proof of stake chain that would be able to communicate with each other and to be able to exist co-independently, and then also to have something which is called token-gated rooms, where you would have the idea that you would have an access token to allow you into a room where you would be able to exchange information freely without having to worry about privacy issues. Awesome. I think that summarizes it.
And Fabian, are there like killer apps on the horizon for LUKSO, or anything to be hyped about near future?
Yeah, so we're making universal profiles, the smart contract account system, more accessible with a mobile app that's coming out. We also will soon allow to create an in-browser. I mean, it's incredibly hard to do this in a decentralized way, right? To build a truly self-sovereign, self-owned thing is very different than building something that kind of looks Web3, but it's completely Web2 tech under the hood. So, and with a universal profile, this is your account. You should control it from multiple devices in multiple places. And the killer app is making it social. That is the killer app. Making it a profile, a wallet, if you will, that you start to care about because it has a face that you identify with. You have multiple, probably, and they don't need to necessarily represent you as your real person, right? It could also be just a fake persona, an avatar. But you want to care. Yeah. When people care about those accounts, that's when DApps actually get users, and that's when actually DApp developers can create interesting things where there is people who want to use it. So that's
social done right. And Charles, do you have one last take, or midnight in 10 seconds?
Well, I actually agree that one of the most important things that's before us as an industry are standards. Standards are important because no one's an island and everybody brings something to it. And getting those standards to be interoperable across all of the different blockchain infrastructure is horrendously difficult because of incentive issues. Nobody likes to play nicely. The other thing briefly is governance, figuring out how to govern these resources we've created without having them be a dictatorship or anarchy, actually have them owned by the commons as a whole. Super hard problem. And this is industries on the forefront of that.
Cool. So thank you all. I hope you enjoyed it. It was fun. I think we could go on forever. But, yeah.